All right, we're recording. Welcome to MTI's second episode of the MTI podcast. So we're going to jump right into it. We've got Kelson, Rob, and myself, Charlie, here. We're going to start off with talking about the MTI Unit Roadshow. So kind of the bottom line up front is we're looking to offer no-cost on-site education and training for military, fire, law enforcement, and mountain athlete groups. And I was just going to do a quick little overview of kind of what that entails. Essentially, we're looking to build a network of like-minded individuals and provide education to encourage the professional responsibility of fitness within our athlete groups. So providing expert instruction, tailored training, practical application, and ultimately improving readiness and performance. What this will look like on the ground when we actually get with units will be pretty flexible. We're looking to provide education that is going to be tailored to that unit's needs specifically. So we're able to really adjust course based on, what the pain points are, what the problems are, what unit leaders identify as the biggest problems or gaps within their fitness, their programming, etc. Ultimately, we're looking to speak with small unit leaders. So, for instance, in the military, the target audience is really squad leader to platoon sergeant, platoon commander type level, where most often the PT programming is actually implemented on the ground, right? So these will generally look like 1 to 2 day events covering a seminar with those small unit leaders, and then practical application for those leaders, and then actually doing some training with those guys to see, what you can do within a 60-minute time period, covering foundational strength conditioning principles. And then additionally, something that we've identified internally is being able to educate small unit leaders how to do long range training, how to construct long range training plans based around the requirements of the job. So, for the military, alternating between field events and coming home to garrison, or for mountain athletes, like a ski guide organization, what you can do in the off season, what you can do in season, etc. And again, these topics can be adjusted based on unit needs. So it's going to be a conversation between us and the receiving unit, and we're looking to get out as much as possible. We've got about 20 units between these 4 groups that have reached out so far, and that conversation is going to start. And I think what we'll likely do is identify the location of these units that have done an outreach to us already, and then once we've got that settled, we'll do additional reach outs. Say, hey, we're doing training in Dallas, Texas, for instance. Any other units want to join in or tag on to this, and see how it goes. Really, the only thing that we need in order to get this done is gym space for physical training and a classroom and projector for instruction. We've got one scheduled on the books already with a Marine battalion from Camp Lejeune at the end of July, and it looks like we'll have a bunch more scheduled here in the very near future. So kind of jumping back to the conversation piece of this, a couple questions for Rob. Rob, I know you visited a lot of units over the last 15 to 20 years, conducting seminars. What's that experience been like for you? Pros, cons, etc.
Overall, it has been really informative, and it's been a great experience overall. What it really helps us, or helps me do, is make us better by introducing us directly to guys on the ground and the athletes on the ground who are using the programming, and get a firsthand view of some of the limitations and challenges they have, especially in terms of equipment, time to train, things like that. And that's informed me and MTI on this end in terms of the programming we design, and how I can best implement it to the guys who are using it out, the athletes are using it out there in the field. There have been some bad experiences. We been contracted to go provide a programming course, and many of the guys that show up at the programming course are never there. And the courses that we've taught and what we're going to be doing here for this roadshow isn't for people who don't know the way around a weight room. We're looking for experienced athletes and leaders who are ready to get a peek to the backside and see what programming looks like. And so we'd show up sometimes at a military unit, and half the guys in there were very junior and just didn't have really any weightlifting experience, and they were lost for the entire course. And so there were times when I actually turned down contracts or opportunities to travel just because I didn't feel the unit was going to get the best out of the programming. And what we don't want to happen is to go provide this kind of instruction and not have it be implemented there. We want to hurt people excited about it. So those have been just a few of the bad experiences. That hasn't happened often, but that's about the only bad experience we had. Sometimes the situation when we get there and what they have set up to work with the gym and the classroom and stuff needs some quick modifications when I get there. Or when we've gotten there before, but we've been able to execute that. So even if it meant me running down to Home Depot and buying a bunch of whiteboard sheets. So
Right.
We're pretty flexible.
Are there any, off the top of your head, are there any actionable takeaways from these previous education efforts that you brought back?
In terms of conducting them, yeah, start on time, get there early, make sure they have whiteboard space, the classroom set up, visit the night before. When you do the gym training, especially if it's at a base gym, the best time to do it is 10 or 11 in the morning. So you have guys come in and do a class early and then schedule the training session at 10, 11 in the morning because the gym is generally empty that time. They fill back up at lunch. So those are some, really basic things. Work with the unit ahead of time to find out what equipment is there. That'll help inform you of how many athletes you can train. Like really quick, we can run a session with 3 and up to 4 guys per station per rack, right? So those types of logistics on our end are important to get straight. I can't think of anything else really to that. I'd really have a good PLC there on the ground for sure. And generally, when people reach out to us for these, it is a great person who's on the ground, who's organizing it, and they're excited to have us come. And they've always been really great to work with.
Yeah, I meant more towards anything that you learned while doing these education seminars that affected programming, right? So like learning something about a certain athlete type group that impacted the programming, certain pain points you just didn't realize before, and then we're able to gather from just being there in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for squad leaders, a lot of the guys in their squads have no lifting experience, so that informed me in terms of really getting basic on the exercises that we designed. There's really, you're a shitty strength and conditioning coach if you can't find exercises to meet the athlete that achieve the objective. So, for example, we moved away from some of the Olympic lifts just to keep it simple, and we would train power in different directions for sure. Another issue is the reality of, especially at line units, access to gyms, and even though you might have an incredibly outfitted, fully functional gym at a major base, the training for everybody is 6 to 7 a.m. or 6 to 8 a.m. And so there's never enough room or enough equipment. That's always an issue, or was an issue for sure. And I don't think it's that much different with units having some of their own equipment. I worked with for example, a couple years ago, I worked with a group of junior officers at a Marine base in Hawaii, and even though their company had a box full of equipment, I mean, no one was allowed the keys to that equipment. When he got in there, it was it was really interesting to see the reality of what guys have to deal with when it comes to training. So that informs us in terms of how we program and design and think about equipment and equipment used for athletes. We designed a grunt fitness, a grunt PT program, which kind of took this into account. And, so we were able to program, one group one platoon doing work capacity, limited equipment, one platoon doing endurance, which is no equipment, and the other platoon, this is for a company, doing, a strength session with equipment and rotate through. So yeah, it certainly has informed my program design.
Do you think, do you expect any opposition as we do this? So obviously there's an increased effort within the military specifically, but also to a certain degree within law enforcement, fire, of in-house or contracted strength and conditioning coaches. So there's like an existing framework of money invested into fitness already. You think we'll get any opposition from whether it's strength conditioning staff or command saying, hey, why are we wasting time with these guys when we've spent all this money on strength and conditioning equipment, personnel, etc.?
Yeah, we've experienced all of that, especially when we don't charge for it. The lawyers go, what's going on? So I always tell units, just ask forgiveness instead of permission.
Yeah.
You'll get your safety Nazis in there. I call them safety Nazis. That's generally the brigade PT and, your guys like that who come in there and have concerns. You've never lifted a, weight or done a sandbag get up or something and think we're going to injure people. There's always these weird type of turf wars between commands and individuals, and it's kind of, we run into some of that weird stuff. And certainly if you're a professional strength and conditioning coach, working with a unit, for example, we were called in to do a programming course with a tier 1 special forces unit, and they had contracted high level in terms of team sports coaches, and those guys were not happy to see us there. The coaches weren't. So yeah, it's amazing some of the blowback you get, but mostly I let the commands and the individuals handle that, and we just make do. Sometimes it's an issue, but generally we just got to be flexible and be agile and make it work.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelson.
It could go in a couple different ways. Just from my experience with different strength and conditioning staff, is some want to just enhance their depth on the bench on any kind of physical fitness attribute. So they're very receptive and they want to learn so they can apply it to their own programming. And at the same time, they might be kind of apprehensive because the guys that they train with every day, they're going to feel like they know these athletes better than we do. So they're, they kind of like, they have a little bit of a rice bowl mentality. Like, these are my guys. These are the guys I train for. I know the aspects of their job better than you. But kind of like Rob just mentioned, most of these guys come from either collegiate or professional sport, like field teams. So I think there's always good things to glean from them. But I think it could be an awkward relationship at first.
Yeah, that's something I'm hoping to kind of, I don't know if mend is the right word, but create relationships with these coaches as we encounter them, prior reach out, because all of the units that have reached out to us so far are members of that unit, not necessarily strength and conditioning staff or fitness staff or health and wellness staff. But I think part of what we do when we make these trips, if they do have somebody in-house, is offer to take these guys out to lunch and have a discussion and see what works, what doesn't work, because it's certainly going to be good for us and probably good for them. Maybe not. But it's so funny that for whatever reason, strength conditioning can be like, particularly with coaches, can be like religion or politics. It just, people get their their heels dug into the ground and don't want to work together, or at least there's just a fear, caution of outside entities, despite the fact that everybody's working for the same goal, right? I mean, it seems silly, but I guess that's what it is, and I think that's probably the case in many other industries too.
I think you might be a little generous there, Charlie, just on my experience. If people are reaching out to us from our email to have us come visit them and give them a course, by definition, they're probably not using their in-house strength conditioning coach, and there's a reason they're not using that person or those people. It could be that that the coaches are too busy, whatever. But there's other issues that come up with coaches. I mean, with the H2F program, many of the coaches, do individual programming. They don't necessarily work with large groups of people. There are problems with the application of sports performance programming to tactical athletes. It just doesn't fit that well. And so that's one thing I will tell you that I have learned in going and when I have spoken and seeing the coaches and seeing how much they were used, and the coaches who were more open to learning something new to incorporate with their sports performance education background, and like Kelson said, they're all coming from that college strength room area. The ones who were learned, they were the great coaches. They had guys following them, and the ones who weren't were the ones who weren't being used that much. So yeah, one thing we can learn is what those coaches are doing and what they're doing for their units, and hopefully establish relationships with those who are open to new approaches.
Yeah, for sure. Good points. Kelson, so Kelson's likely going to be doing the majority of the education aspect when we go to visit these units. And there's obviously some large cultural differences between military fire law enforcement and mountain athletes. Have you thought about, Kelson, any different approaches, or do you think it's this is the venue and method of delivery, in terms of making sure that these lessons are best processed?
Yeah, so I've kind of categorized it into two different ways on how I'm going to approach it, and I do that just so I can keep it simple. And a lot of it's like military and law enforcement are similar in my eyes, and then I kind of group together firefighters and mountain athletes just because of mentality wise. But I think my first approach for working with military and law enforcement, just because a lot of that's where my background exists, is like the first thing you got to do to grab a guy's attention is like you got to like give him the why up front. Like, why are we doing this, right? And for the military, it's like how does the training directly enhance your operational readiness? And that's kind of key on how they can how they can connect the dots between what you're teaching them and real world application. So they understand that, you're not wasting their time on, like selling them snake oil or whatnot, even though we're not selling them anything. And at the same time, with the similarities in law enforcement, you're still explaining them the why, but you're like, with law enforcement, 90% of the time, no one is happy to see them. So you gotta kind of like pull that string and then explain why the training methodology in which you're taking is helping with specifically with like their situational readiness and like their safety. Because I almost look at a police officer, he's always going into a contingency because he doesn't really know, he doesn't know all the details. So just having a good understanding and a good grasp of, you know, what they face every day, and being able to talk to the methodologies on why you choose the various programming aspects, I think is important. So I guess just putting the why up front for military and law enforcement, and then like we'll just say for fire rescue and for like the mountain athlete side of things is, because I don't have as much experience in those realms. I mean, I have a decent understanding from like research and like obviously talking with you guys, but you know, you gotta approach these situations with a aspect of humility and not be afraid to like have a dialogue and ask questions with these guys, so you have a better understanding of their demands. So it's kind of like for me, it's going to be a little more of a give and take with a firefighter, because I've never experienced that realm. I have ideas, and I want to run it by them, but I also want some feedback from them so we can implement that into programming to either improve it or change it. And then the same thing with like mountain athletes. There's a huge variety of what guys are doing in the mountains. I have a decent amount of knowledge in some aspects, but there's also a lot of different mountain sports that I still need to wrap my head around and get a really in-depth idea of the demands of these guys. So having the conversation on like, what do you think about this programming? This is why we use it. Is there something we're missing? So like a degree of humbleness with working with the unknown, I think is probably how I'd approach it with those guys.
Yeah, Rob, do you think would you agree with that?
Yeah, to some extent. I think one thing that is consistent across all the athletes that we work with is they can get severely injured or killed during doing their work or sport. And fitness, sport specific or job specific fitness can be armor against injury, and it can also lead to better technical practice from out there working on their skills. What I have learned in terms of lessons learned is, especially with courses with law enforcement, is there's no few law enforcement agencies or units have on-time duty to train, so they're taking their own time to train, and few have gyms that are set up in a functional fitness situation. Even if they do have like a base gym, a lot of police detectives and patrolmen, they drive their cars home, and their base where the gym is may be a long way from where their home is. So it's just some complicating factors. On the fire rescue side, I learned pretty quickly that every station seems to have a little room where there's a treadmill, maybe some weights and kettlebells and dumbbells and stuff. So they have space to train. A lot of them have time on duty to train during their 12-hour shift or whatever, 24-hour shift. But often we learn that, they'll be starting to work out, and then you'll get a call out for an EMT or a fire, and so it can be broken up. So yeah, we definitely have learned some things that have informed the programming on those sides. One of the advantages of doing it the way that we're doing it here, where we go out to units who are inviting us in, is we know that those units are open to the idea of fitness, and that's not always the case with first responder units and first responder individuals. So at least we're coming into a welcoming audience, and there's really not a hard sell that you need to make. In my experience, that they're ready to learn.
Got it. Well, I think it'll be a pretty cool venture to get out and make face with these guys and see how it goes. Hopefully we get lots of takeaways ourselves, and hopefully we are able to provide some decent education. I'll throw the link to the information on this if there's anybody listening that is interested in getting their units signed up for this. I guess all we ask is that you and your guys be into it, right? Come in with an open mind and be interested. What we definitely don't want to see is a a bunch of people in the audience who have been told they need to be there, and they're not paying attention, right? Because then they're wasting their time, they're wasting our time, and that's not what we want. So hopefully we're able to get this thing rolling. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a pretty cool deal. I'm gonna.
Hey Charlie, have you?
Go ahead.
I haven't seen the latest list. Are there any mountain groups who have ponied up yet or expressed interest specifically?
Yeah, one.
Yeah. What is interesting, I think, from there's not a strong tradition of gym-based fitness training within the mountain sports, except for downhill skiing, competitive downhill skiing, and sometimes it can be a hard sell to mountain athletes. And one of the things we learned early on is not only that gym-based training can increase outside performance, but especially for mountain athletes, you can make your technical practice outside more efficient. So, for example, you're a rock climber, you're working on, trying to red point 510, and you're going out there and you're finding when you go to the crag that, after 4 or 5 pitches or climbs, your finger grip and grip is just smoked and you're done for the day. And that's where gym-based training, where you can, in a more concentrated, focused manner, build that kind of sport-specific fitness. Then when you go back to that crag, instead of, having to come off working specific technical training, after 5 pitches, maybe you can go hard for 8 or 10. So it can really make an interesting difference. So I certainly hope that more mountain groups realize that and see that it might be a benefit for both of us to see what we have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously there's going to be some obstacles just because of the way professional mountain athletes, which is going to be I think probably the majority of folks who might be interested in this, are organized, which is, either via professional organizations or by an employer. But, so often many of these mountain athlete employment opportunities are part-time, right? So they're seasonal. So for instance, I was actually, my family and I are in the mountains in North Carolina right now, and we did a kayaking trip down some really light, like whitewater stuff with my 6-year-old, and the guide is a sponsored whitewater kayaker, and he asked me what I did, and I was telling him about that. And he's really interested, right? I think he was, super interested and wanted to learn more about it. But it's, how do you get to that individual? Because he's employed by a guiding service at the moment, but that's going to end come end of August. So how do you find these guys? How do you find the guys that are interested in this kind of stuff? So I guess we'll kind of have to play this by ear a little bit and see how it goes. But that's certainly part of the reason we wanted to discuss it on this podcast is, for anybody who is interested, that can get a group together. We're interested too.
Yeah, I can say that, working with kayakers here in Jackson, we would get a few sponsored kayakers there in the spring, and I had the most fun working with those guys. I didn't find any mountain athlete group that, or group athletes that worked harder. And, kayaking, a lot of the kayaking programming was like upper body strength, endurance, and strength. And those guys came out of the program jacked. So it was really fun to see them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was really great programming. A lot of fun to work with.
Cool. Let's move on to the tactical agility conversation. So just as a background, just yesterday, the 3 of us had I think a 2-hour conversation on some potential areas of programming improvement. And one of the areas is our tactical agility, or what we've called TAC-SEPA in the past. So just to lay a layer of background, our purpose with tactical agility is, by definition, by us, is to familiarize tactical athletes with common movement patterns they will need to deploy under fire or under tactical situations. So I just wanted to first get some background of how this came to be, because this certainly wasn't tactical agility, or TAC-SEPA wasn't in the programming from day one with 2007 Rob at Mountain Athlete. So Rob, you mind giving a little bit of background of how you identified that gap and you thought it was necessary to install TAC-SEPA, tactical agility work with tactical athletes?
Yeah, I had just a concern that you would go to the gym and do our programming. Let's say you're a patrol officer, and then out on patrol you get called and you have to, let's say you go to a wellness visit, a wellness check, or no, a domestic violence call, and you show up there, and all of a sudden someone starts shooting at you through the window, so you got to drop down, and then there's some potential victims inside, so you got to drop down, sprint to the house, drop down again, jump through a window, get it, and I was just concerned that each of those movements has a technical skill element to it, especially under load. And nothing in our programming seems to train for those specifically in a way that they would transfer to the field. And what we don't want to do as strength and conditioning coaches is have athletes experience something in the field that they've never seen before, a physical demand in the field, a fitness demand that they haven't seen before in the gym. We want them as best as we can to cover all the bases, especially for tactical athletes. So that was the idea behind what we originally called TAC-SEPA, standing for Tactical Strength. SEPA was speed, explosive power, and agility. And then over the years, I kind of moved away from the ideas of explosive power and kind of focused on just agility. And I thought that TAC-SEPA was a really weird kind of acronym, and just went to tactical agility. And again, the goal is to train these kind of movement patterns that are common across most tactical athlete populations in a way. It's important to understand that tactical agility is not fitness. We're not training work capacity or strength. We're training movement patterns. And again, the idea is to kind of identify the major movement patterns that athletes are experiencing in a tactical situation, under fire, and have a part of the programming that had them do that in the gym, and so they could practice it. And ideally, out in the field, when it did, and if it did happen, they knew what it felt like. They could move better. They could move quicker, and it would increase their survivability. So that was the idea behind it.
Yeah, part of the conversation that we had yesterday was exploring the relationship between agility and fitness. So, is one more important than the other in terms of one being able to do these movements in a high stress situation, and then as a secondary, building that durability to not get injured when you're doing these movements from in a high stress situation, which can often be, from 0 to 100 miles per hour very quickly across our tactical populations. So any thoughts on that, Rob, in terms of, where does there need to be a focus on one over the other, or are they married? Are they of equal importance?
Well, there's two types of injury that can occur to a tactical athlete in a tactical situation. They can be too slow and get shot, quite honestly, or be too slow and the beam from the ceiling can fall on them if they're fighting a fire because they didn't move fast enough. So that's certainly one. The second is they can do a movement, hop through a window and jump the other side, and land awkwardly, and tear their knee up or something. So there are two types of areas there, and I think fitness, the fitness side of it, is approaches kind of the first side, which is making sure that from a fitness perspective in MTI programming, for example, the work capacity element of our fitness programming for military and law enforcement athletes has a shuttle sprint repeat emphasis. We do more shuttle sprint repeats in our work capacity programming than any other type of program. Work capacity, and there's a reason for that. There's short shuttle sprints. Is that because under fire you need to move fast, and so there's the fitness element that we hope to add to it. But on the agility side, you can be even a good athlete if not kind of somewhat familiar with what's happening. can jump from a ledge or crawl, jump over a fence or something like that, and injure themselves even if they are fit, if they haven't done that movement before. So that the agility side is not to train fitness, but to train the technique. There's more efficient, better ways to hop over, a box or over a fence, or drop to prone, get up and run again really fast without smoking your lower back or hurting your lower back. And those are kind of technical movement patterns that are separate from the fitness side. They can work together for sure, but there are two different things. And the agility part ideally is going to focus on the movement side of it, the technical skill part, and the fitness will handle the fitness side. One of the things we talked about yesterday was, if we can develop tactical agility drills that can have a dual purpose. We can run them with a lot of rest between each drill so the athletes get full recovery and are able to focus on their movement, which will train their movement patterns. And then secondly, we can also run them as a work capacity event, so that the athletes can not only train the movement pattern, but also at the same time, kind of a agility specific fitness. We have one drill, it's called we call it the Taxipa burpee box jump drill. And it's about the only one I've done this with before, where you kind of run, you drop prone, you jump up on the box, and then the other side, you drop prone, do a burpee, and then you sprint forward and do it again. And we've done that both for a full rest between to kind of teach, run, drop to prone, hop up over, get up, sprint again, the movement patterns. But then we've also done it for like 9 minutes straight. And it's an incredible work capacity smoker too. So they work together. They're not exclusive, but we want to train each individually too. I don't know if I answered your question. I hope that wasn't too complicated an answer.
No, I think that covers it well. Kelson's been doing a lot of the work on this in terms of driving this aspect of the programming forward. Kelson, what do you think some of the most major areas of improvement are? And also talk a little bit about how we're differentiating between populations. Like, I think we discussed, is military the same as law enforcement? What are the differences there? Is law enforcement the same as fire? Are there differences there in how we come up with drills and then employ those drills within the programming?
Yeah. And first, I just like to start off on how we're training agility versus a sports team, right? Ours is like the common movement pattern. So I think that's just a very, important distinction between that and what they do on the field. And when we talk about movement patterns, just for context of the listeners, we're talking about like sprint from a walk, or like, we'll just say like changing levels from like sitting to kneeling or to the ground as quickly as possible. Sprinting and all of a sudden stopping like abruptly to take cover, or jumping over obstacles, or even like potentially jumping off a building or a ledge, and we would consider that a drop. So all those have like varying impacts on different athletes. So kind of what we're doing right now is we have this whole buffet of different tactical agility drills, and we're working on like refining them to a specific athlete. So where we're at right now is as far as military and like the law enforcement tactical athlete, we all view them as having the same movement patterns. So that's essentially a focus, one of the focuses. And then the other side is the fire rescue. They have different movement patterns. A lot of it could consist of like dragging heavy objects across the ground, like a hose, or rescuing someone in a building and needing to stay low but assist them across the ground at the same time. So what we're doing right now is we're refining the tactical agility drills, and then we're making them, we might revamp some of them to make them that 80% solution to meet those major areas of movement. And then once we identify those, we'll be able to like simplify our programming towards placing those specific agility drills towards like a specified audience. Yeah, do you got anything on that?
Yeah, I think that one thing I would add, one of the significant differences between sport performance agility and tactical agility is loading. And the way we have traditionally, thus far, programmed these drills, you do 4 rounds unloaded, and then you put on a weight vest and you do them loaded. And of course, in the sports performance world, you're a soccer player, you're doing ladder drills, you don't add a weight vest and then do ladder drills in a weight vest, right? But every athlete that we work with, even most mountain athletes, have some type of loading. And it can be anything from a 45-pound, day kit for a patrol for a military athlete to, a weight vest and duty belt for a patrol officer, to, turnout gear for a firefighter, which can be up to 75 pounds. It's incredible how much load they can carry, especially when they get wet. We want to do these not only unloaded to work on the movement patterns, but then loaded to know what that feels like and see how movement patterns may need to be modified because of the load. And that's an important element. And one of the things that we have Kelson looking at is if the way that we've done it this far, 4 unloaded, then 4 loaded is the best way to do it. So I'm pretty excited about this. It's a good time to come back and continuous improvement on our programming and have someone like Kelson who has, field combat experience bring his eyes to it and make sure that we're hitting all the points we need to.
Yeah, on that note, Kelson, throughout your career, did you employ agility training into your day-to-day fitness training, or was it specialized? How did you do that, or how did you see others that in your peer group employ those?
I did it. It was very limited in the programming and to what I experienced. I did do some programs where we would do agility drills. We would do like 4-cone drills. None of it was ever weighted or progressed in any sense. It was kind of like we were just doing it. It wasn't timed, so we didn't really have, we didn't have anything to compare it against. But we just didn't do it very much. We focused on a lot more like shuttle type work, which kind of stems more into, work capacity than anything. But one thing I forgot to mention is that we're going to try to like delineate between the different tactical agility drills and how some of those can apply into work capacity. So we might have like a dual effort type drill that we can apply on both, which I think will be fairly meaningful in the future for work capacity events.
Yeah, it's definitely a interesting dilemma. Particularly, I can speak from the fire side and its differences with the military, since I have a background in both. They're drastically different. In the military, you're moving fast, particularly if it's something within those last 50 meters. Military, you're sprinting and you're level changing and you're jumping and you're dropping. In the fire service, if you're running with turnout gear, you're fucking up. It's really that you don't run in turnout gears in a fire environment. It's really much more combination, as Kelson mentioned earlier, of dragging, crawling, and then reverse dragging. If you're conducting a rescue, and then sometimes just the simple stuff of throwing an extension ladder. If you're going to do a roof cut, you got to get that ladder, which is big, heavy, and definitely very awkward, over somebody's front lawn, which sounds simple, but often that ground is not even. It's not a turf environment. You've got landscaping. If it's a more rural environment, it might be hills and uneven terrain on how you place that and throw that ladder, all that good stuff. So usually what we were taught fairly early is move with a purpose, certainly, but you're not running, right? And also there's the added complication of being on air, which is very limited. So you don't want to be sprinting on air because you're going to kill your air supply in 5 minutes. Whereas if you're walking, you can get 30 minutes out of it. So being able to, do these movements in a rapid but safe manner with controlled respiration, controlled heart rate, etc. So they're very drastically different. So it's kind of an interesting thing to take a harder look at and see how we apply this kind of programming within the agility realm to the greater populations, and just getting better at it. I mean, I think that's something all three of us take some pride in, is the continuous improvement efforts on the programming, which is what people come to us for, making sure we're doing the best service for them. And it's nice to have, internally here quite a bit of experience across all these different athlete types. And then also, I think probably this roadshow is going to potentially identify some additional things, maybe within agility specifically, but potentially within just the programming constructs overall. Any other notes on the tactical agility?
Well, I'm just a old strength coach, and but when we do those, our lab rats, old guys like me, they were fun. Those drills are fun. So it was a break from the other stuff we did, and we make fun of each other because we go to jump over boxes and crash in the boxes, and the boxes fall over, or we'd try to do a low crawl stuff with the sledgehammer, and we definitely got better at them. But it was kind of a nice break from training, and they were kind of fun to do. So it's always good to have fun programming and training.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, switching to our last topic here. So Kelson's currently, and has been for about a month now, working on a single man mini study that's taking a hard look at the impact of pack weight on vertical gain speed. So I think you mentioned yesterday that by the end of the study, you'll have covered about 200 miles. But Kelson, you want to give us an overview of the mini study, its intent and design structure, and what we've learned so far, what we're hoping to gain from it?
Yeah, I think what this initially was is Rob's welcoming to MTI with like a punishment, and he's like, I got a good mini study for you. To which it's actually pretty sweet mini study. It's been pretty fun. Yeah, just kind of a little background on it. I started it on May 14th with like the overall intent is to define the influence of pack weight over like vertical gain speed, and it's specifically geared for like a fast alpine ascent. So working with Rob, like the best way we determined a pack weight is we did some studies on fast alpine descent pack weights, found out that 22 pounds is on the heaviest side, and then 15 pounds is on the lighter side of a pack. Once we identified that, we found a route here up in northwest Montana where I'm located that I can grab 2,000 feet of vertical gain fairly easily and repeatable. That was one of like the testing criteria, and we chose 2,000 feet because it allowed for enough time on the trail to show if there's any significant aerobic impact, and then and what that aerobic impact looks like is how we govern how fast I am on the trail is by holding a sub threshold heart rate. So for me, it's I do a 70 to 80% max heart rate, which ends up to be about 138 to 148 is where I maintain my heart rate. And so essentially I started with a 22-pound pack, and I gained 2,000 feet of elevation, and then I mark the time. And then for each additional rep, I drop it by 8 ounces. We chose 8 ounces because We need to find that fine line in what we can get away with as far as like either purchasing gear, lighter gear, or essentially it has speed versus safety aspect with it as well. So essentially that's the 8-ounce drop in weight each time. Right now, I'm currently, my next rep will be at 18.5 pounds. And the overall trend is I am getting faster as I drop weight, but there's been some interesting factors in there, some environmental factors, to where I did it one day when it was a little too hot, and it slowed me way down. So that's one of the challenges, is maintaining a very consistent, very consistent environmental factors, and at the same time, with 8 ounces, you're talking about, what if you drink 2 cups of coffee? So that could have an influence. Or what if you have a different size breakfast than the other day? So there's a lot of different influences in what I'm noticing. So I try to stay consistent across the whole thing. But I think the goodness of this mini study, or at least the outcome, is where we're going, or what we're trying to achieve, is I like to put it in like 2 different categories, right? Is buying speed. So this mini study could potentially inform gear purchase to the extent of like a difference between a heavier and lighter carabiner, or the difference in a heavier or lighter Gore-Tex jacket, or even like a rope, a climbing rope. That could inform how quickly you move through the mountains on a fast alpine ascent. Or the other category is like, at some point you're not going to be able to buy speed, right? Like, you can only get such light equipment. So now you're talking about sacrificing safety. So once you bought all your speed, now you're in the decision realm of, should I take a Gore-Tex jacket? How much water should I take? should I take that extra meal? So it's trying to provide some kind of framework for guys doing these fast alpine ascents, and maybe it will help them in their decision making criteria. Does that sound about right there, Rob?
Yeah, we've done studies along this line before, and this idea of moving fast in the mountains, the idea comes back to this idea that speed is safety, and that the faster you can move in the mountains, if you're doing an ascent, the less exposure you have, which means there's less chance of something bad happening. And that has driven, this fast and light world of alpine and other types of climbing now, and backcountry skiing and everything in this last, decade or more. But there's but nobody can tell you, okay, what drop in weight of your pack makes a difference in terms of your speed moving. In other words, do you have to drop a pound, 2 pounds, whatever. That's what we hope to find with the studies, to see if we can find a break point where, if you cut your pack weight by 5 pounds, you're going to get faster. But if you cut it by 7, you don't gain much. So maybe you should go ahead and bring that Gore-Tex jacket. Again, like Kelson said, there's 2 decisions that alpinists make who are on the serious side. One is to buy speed, which means paying more money for lighter gear. And generally in the alpine or in the mountain sport world, you pay up for lighter gear with your backcountry hunting or whatever. And then the secondly is whether you need to bring a piece of gear. And then if you, for example, you make a decision on an alpine climb, not to bring a waterproof Gore-Tex jacket, something happens, you get off route, you get caught in a storm, and you risk hypothermia because now you're wet. So there's a decision to be made there. So it's really an interesting study. We've done this before on the backcountry skiing element side, which is another area where this comes up quite a bit, but not to micro level that we're trying to do here with Kelson. And we've also done just a basic study on, how much impact does 45 pounds impact you moving uphill. It makes a big difference. What is interesting about the study is we've governed how much effort Kelson is putting into it by setting a max heart rate you can go. So in other words, he can't go, faster than what is like 70% of his max heart rate. And so ideally, for the lighter load, he would be able to move faster, going at the same heart rate. That's what we hope to see. So it'll be really interesting to see if we get any data from this that is conclusive. That will help alpine athletes, mountain athletes who are looking at loads this light, make gear purchasing and bringing along decisions. And even as a backcountry hunter, this affects me. The base weight of my backcountry hunting pack is right around 25, 22 pounds. And so I've spent a lot of money, especially as an old guy at 56, to decrease the weight of my pack. And I've noticed myself that's made a huge difference in terms of how I feel, recover, how fast I can move in the mountains. But I have made maybe perhaps some stupid choices in terms of what gear I didn't bring, or maybe some stupid choices in terms of what gear I spent a lot of money on, like a $1,000 tent versus a $300 tent to save a few ounces. And so hopefully this will help inform those types of decisions.
Yeah, and Kelson, I think you might be onto something, because I think the first month of my internship in 2016 with MTI was spent going up and down and up and down and up and down Snow King in Jackson repeatedly with a couple jugs of water. So there might be some gains in terms of our what we learned from this, but there also might be a hazing component to it too.
Yeah, it's a trend, It's Rob Shaw's initiation to MTI.
I was right there along Charlie doing this.
That's for sure. That's for sure. That was a wonderful, humbling moment. I thought I was a pretty decent athlete. Came from essentially sea level, moved to Jackson, which I think is at 6,000 or so feet elevation, and then whatever the gain was on Snow King. And I had Rob was just absolutely smoking me. So I've got this old guy smoking me up the hill, and then there was a couple very petite females who were just, I saw them at the start, and then I would see them the next day because they just took off up the hills. Golly, something to this uphill training. Kelson, how are you cutting 8 ounces at a time?
So I have my designated pack that I use for consistency each time, and then I have a dromedary bag full of water, to which each time I measure out the water for the dromedary bag, so I know that I'm getting the exact weight. And then once I get up to my 2,000 feet, I dump the water and run down.
Yeah,
save the knees.
Yeah, that seems to be the way to do it for training. Cool. That's about all we've got for today. Any saved rounds on this, guys? Nope. Sounds good. All right. Well, we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening in on second episode of MTI podcast. We're definitely open to topics. So if you want to ping us with something that you're interested in, let us know. We might ignore it. We might take it into account, but hoping to make this thing regular occurrence. And I think it's, at least for us, it's an interesting conversation. So appreciate you listening. And all right, that's it. See you guys.